What's going on, guys? So today I want to talk about 5 things that everyone needs in their garage. They're not all tools. I guess it's better to say they're not all intended to be tools. Some of them are things that I've seen other mechanics using that I've like, oh, I want to buy that. I need one of those, and it has been immensely useful. Other things, they're probably not really intended to be sold as a tool at all, but it has turned into one of the most useful tools that I have. My most favorite one, I'm just going to talk about first. This isn't going to be like a, oh, the 5th one, talk about the 5th one, and I'm going to work my way up to number 1. No. My most favorite one, I'm just going to mention first, and then I'm just going to talk about everything else, because the other things are really cool, and they've saved me a ton of time, but this one, I just feel like it takes the cake, and I want to talk about it first. I don't remember what they're called. I mean, I like to call them remote location hose clamps, because you squeeze the handle over here, and then the hose clamp moves over here, because it has little fingers that hold onto the hose clamp. And then you squeeze, and the hose clamp moves. You can also lock it in place, so you can squeeze it, and then if I were to press this right now, it would release. But I used these in the last video that I made, which pretty much made me think about making this video. I basically had, if you can visualize, hose clamp was on the radiator, on the lower radiator hose, and the frame was right here. It was so close to the hose clamp that there was no way that I could have gotten pliers in to loosen that up. And then trying to get my hand up there from the bottom, it's just a pain. I've done that, I don't know how many times, and it's always taken so long just to get the hose clamp off. And vice grips work, right? I mean, I had these here to show like a really good alternative. These are good. These are awesome if you have the space around to use them. There have been sometimes I could look at the hose clamp, I can see it, but there's not enough space for me to actually get these in there. And I just grab this, wiggle the cable around to where it's in place, put it on the hose clamp, squeeze the hose clamp, slide it off the hose, and that's it. Getting the difficult one off a few days ago when I was changing the radiator out in the FJ Cruiser. I put an all aluminum radiator in the FJ Cruiser in the last video. It's a pointless plug. It took me probably 10 seconds to remove this hose clamp from that spot that was beside the frame. You can buy these on Amazon. I think they're just called hose clamp pliers. The next thing I want to talk about is actually 2 things. It comes as a set of 2 if you buy a set of 2. I use them as miniature screw jacks, and they're really easy to use with one hand. If you want to be slow, you can do it this way, or it's like, oh, I've got to raise it up some, and then you've effectively raised it up a couple inches so that you can put a brake caliper there, or whatever. You're working underneath the car and you loosen a part, but it's got like wires attached to it, and you have to reach something else. Hey, just grab this, set it on top of that, loosen the wires and everything, balance it, practice your balancing skills, loosen it, set it on top of that, and then you're done. So I've used it underneath the transmission, I've used it to put underneath the frame of a car, because this is a fairly wide base. The thing that I like the most is I can adjust and fine tune and get it to where it's holding up whatever. I'm trying to line up a bolt, and if you're working with a lower control arm, you're trying to line it up so that you can put the wheel spindle in place, and you have this hand and this hand, and you just need something to push up on the lower control arm. And I've done it with my knee before, but then I found this, like, oh, I don't have to use my knee anymore to push the lower control arm up while I'm trying to hold the wheel spindle in place and then push the bolt through. And I just use this. It's a set of 2. I think they were about $20, $20 to $30, something like that. All these will be in the description, so you can check them out on Amazon if you want. But these have been very useful. They're actually made to stabilize a trailer. Like if you haul a car up somewhere and you want to release that trailer from the truck that you're towing the trailer with, you can set these underneath, make your trailer level, and then you leave your car there. I guess I don't know, but yeah. So these are incredibly useful in more ways than you would think just by having them around the garage. They have a 6,000 pound weight limit. But considering how lightweight they are, they're aluminum. Considering how lightweight they are, I don't think I wouldn't want to put 6,000 pounds on one of these for sure. And you can see I bent this one. I drove over it with my vehicle. I wouldn't jack up a car with this, and it actually says do not use as a jack. It just says use it to stabilize only. So these are very useful also. The next one pretty much contends for that number one spot for the most creative, not really most creative tool ever made, because it's not exactly a tool, but there's a technique called reverse bleeding. So if you've ever been doing a brake job or a clutch job, or you've been in a situation to where you have to bleed the brakes by yourself, and you're like, man, nobody else is here, I don't have a brake bleeder with me. Well, you can bleed an entire system by yourself with this, and I would prefer this method over having a second person. Even if a second person is there, I'm going to use reverse bleeding technique. You can use a vacuum bleeder. They're not as easy to find as this. I think I got this from Walmart from the fish tank section. It's just a syringe that you start the suctioning. You start draining out a fish tank, and then the fluid keeps coming out. But you can order them for cheaper than you can a vacuum bleeder system. But pushing the fluid up from the bottom severely limits how many air bubbles are created in the system. So when you're bleeding a clutch or a brake system the traditional way, whether it's on a motorcycle or a car or whatever it is, you have somebody fill up the fluid from the reservoir, and then you start pumping. As you're pumping, the fluid is trying to make its way past all the air that's in the lines. All of that's mixing together because you're in the driver's seat just slamming on the pedal. You're aerating the brake fluid, so you end up getting all these little tiny air bubbles in your system. Over time, the air bubbles join together, and then that's where you get the spongy air pockets, because brake lines aren't always straight. So there's curves and there's bends and everything in the brake lines. Air bubbles get trapped in some of those spots, and when they're trapped, that becomes a little spongy area. Also, it creates moisture. It's heating up, it's cooling down, moisture gets created. That's not good on the inside of a brake line. So it's things to keep in mind. These are so, I want to say it's less than $5, even with them being overpriced at Walmart. I mean, you could buy one of these online for like a couple bucks. But extremely useful. I did a video a couple weeks ago changing out the clutch in my FJ Cruiser, and I put in a different slave cylinder, and I received the wrong parts basically, so it sat for a month before I was able to finish the video. During that time, all the fluid drained out of the system, and with all the fluid drained out of the system, all I had to do was fill this up. It took about 100 milliliters filling up the dry clutch system, but I filled it up with fluid all the way. I pretty much put the tool on the bleed screw, put this on the bleed screw, loosened the bleed screw, and then I just pushed the fluid up until it started coming out of the reservoir. Closed the bleed screw, took this off, and there was no pumping of the pedal. All of the air had made its way to the top. It was a long horizontal clutch line with bends and whatnot, so completely dry system with the exception of the fluid that was around the master cylinder. So push the fluid up from the bottom, and then I was ready to go. It only took, I think, 2 or 3 pumps with my foot, and I had a solid pedal. Before I get to the last one, this is still a tool, so this is the fourth thing that I'm going to talk about. I consider this a tool. The next time you have a soap bottle, don't throw it away. Or you could just snag your wife's soap bottle. It's like, where's my soap bottle? I don't know, babe. Must have misplaced it. I don't know. But say next time you're doing a brake job and you change your brake pads out, you put the new brake pads on, you have to squeeze the caliper in because you have to push the piston back in. When you do that, it raises the fluid level in the reservoir. So grab a soap bottle, put it in the top of the reservoir, and then squirt the brake fluid into the soap bottle. Just don't go and put your wife's soap bottle back on the sink after you're done with it when you have brake fluid and soap. It's not explosive or anything, but your wife may be. That's probably not a good idea. If she could figure it out, that would be impressive. If she could figure out that brake fluid was in your soap. But I keep one of these in the garage. I've actually lost more than I've tried to keep in the garage, but I keep one of these in the garage just because of how useful it can be with things like that. Just don't get soap in your brake fluid. Make sure you clean it off first before you start jamming a tube down in your reservoir that has soap all over it. The last thing, there have been times that I could not get an oil filter off, and this doesn't come with it. This is just a little, kind of like a miniature breaker bar thing. but it's little fingers that grab on to the oil filter. So it's like a little party. The harder you crank on this to try to loosen the oil filter, the more these grab the filter. So now you put it on the filter. Once you start to move it, it does not want to come off. The only downside to this is you get oil on these, they're slippery. So they don't grab they grab the top of this one because it's a Fram, but if the oil filter is a little bit more slippery, it's not going to grab it. It will try to grab. You can take these little silicone things off, and mine has little teeth. So there's little teeth on the inside of this. I've thought about drilling a little hole into each one of these and putting a screw into it, so that whenever I put it on the filter, and then I go to loosen the filter, the sharp end of the screw digs into the filter and it just grabs onto it like raptor claw. These are less than $10. All the things that I mentioned here, you could spend $50 to $60 and you can buy all the things. And if you bought one of these, you'll have soap. I mean, win-win, right? You have a bunch of tools and then you have soap to clean your hands when you're done. These are by far my most favorite tools that I have in the garage, and some of them aren't even really tools. This is a syringe for a fish tank and a soap bottle. Check the links down below. I have all of these, all the stuff where you can buy on Amazon, so check that out. But if you've watched through to this point, I do have a bonus thing that I want to talk about. JB Weld, everybody has it, but the way that I use it sometimes is kind of out of the ordinary. We've all had broken plastics, like these little tabs break off. That's not fun, because now if you had intended to sell, this is a Altezza, no, it's a fake Altezza grill. I've got an IS300 that I will soon be making videos on. I wanted to fix this because the tab broke off on this side, and this is JB Weld and copper wire. Basically, I drilled a hole in this way, there and there, 2 holes, I guess, because I can't count apparently. So I drilled 2 holes into the plastic that's the same diameter as this copper wire that I used, bent it into a U, slid it into the 2 holes, and then I just formed a little cardboard cup thing that was taped to the bottom of this, mixed up some JB Weld, and put it around the outside of the copper wire. After I cleaned up the inside, you can see, I'll turn it around to the bottom, so you can see the copper on the bottom, and if you turn it a little bit, you can see the copper on the inside too. So if I were to paint it, no one would think that this was ever repaired. It's just as strong. It's just as strong as that side, if not stronger. That side's just weak plastic. This side's JB Weld and copper that's anchored in plastic. Anyway, yeah, that's it. Those are my 5 most favorite tools out of the entire garage that if I have to use them, they definitely get their money's worth. Thanks a lot for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment. God bless you guys.